Good morning. It is Sunday morning, December 12th. My name is Douglas Griffin. This is my Sunday school class. Um, let's see. We are in the book of Genesis. We're in chapter 45. We've been going all the way through. I like to sometimes refer to it as the unbiased word because we are trying to just look at the verses to see what they say, not being influenced by stories or movies or songs or just what does it really say? Because there have been a lot of Hollywood versions of these Bible stories, and so getting a better perspective by just going verse by verse, right, all the way through. So we're in Genesis chapter 45, reminding you that Joseph was sold into slavery by his brothers, but how many years later? Uh, many years later, 22 years later, um, his brothers show up and oh, oh, okay. His brothers show up and they don't recognize Joseph because they haven't seen him in however many years that's been. Um, yeah, about 22 years. And so he teases them for a while, actually kind of punishes them. But then it hits them. It finally hits Joseph why God did all of this. My hypothesis, my theory, is that it should have hit Joseph earlier. When they first walked in, Joseph should have said, "Oh, this is what God was doing." But it takes a while. It takes three different incidences where where strongholds are broken in his life, where he realizes, oh, and he starts to cry. Uh, and there's some stories he had told himself about God, and that's what we're really telling him. There's stories we tell ourselves about how the universe works that are not true. And so he, uh, once they're broken one at a time, he finally realizes that although his brothers may have had an evil plot, God is the one that allowed it to go forward because he had a purpose. That's the good news, is that even if somebody means ill towards you, that if God allows it to go forward, he's going to turn it around and use it for good in your life ultimately. So it may inconvenience you for a while, it may frustrate you for a while, but eventually, uh, if God allowed it to go forward, he's looking way down the road. This dumb thing that this person's doing, I'm going to turn it around and it's going to work out very good. So in Genesis chapter 45, verse 8, just to review, um, Joseph says, "So now it was not you who sent me here, but God." Now they sent him there, right? They put him in the pit and then sold him off to the Ishmaelites, knowing they were on their way to Egypt. But he says, "Not, it wasn't really you. It was God. God had a plan. God allowed that to go forward. God didn't send a hurricane to blow you all away right before you did that or something, because he had a longer range plan." That's the good thing about God, is that he can look way down the road. So he had a long range plan for what was going on. Hey, Susie. Um, and so he says, it wasn't you. God was behind this. And if we could get to that point where we realize, okay, God is in charge of everything that happens, then we would be less angry. Because that's when Joseph's anger dropped finally. Because he was angry at his brothers for what they did to him. That's why he was treating them badly. Everybody tries to make Joseph sound like he was just trying to get them to repent or trying to. No, he was mad at his brothers. And as far as he was concerned, they could have all left and Benjamin could have stayed. And that was really his plot. I'm going to get you all to leave. I figured out a way to get Benjamin to save so I can save my little brother from my mom. Uh, and the rest of you, I'm going to load you up with stuff because I don't hate you, but I am mad at you. And you can all go home. And then once he realized, oh, this was all part, I was sent ahead of you to save your life so that during this drought, you could come here for the next 5 years and I'll be able to feed you and your family will thrive and we won't die in the desert. Oh, God knew the drought that was coming. Um, and so he wanted to save your family, our family. So again, verse 8, so it was not you who sent me here, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh and Lord of all his house and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. Like God put me in this position. So hurry, go up to my father, verse 9. Say to him, thus says your son Joseph, God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not tarry. You shall dwell in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near to me, and you and your children, and your children's children, and your flocks, and your herds, and all that you have. This is perfect. You'll be able to survive this severe drought, which is going to. And Joseph already knew that the drought was so severe that it would seem like the 7 years of plenty had never existed. So God knows things in advance, and if we're listening, we're prepared for what comes. We may not know what's coming, but God, I don't know why God has me putting my stuff away in storage, or I don't know why God has me pulling out all my winter coats, but I just feel like doing this. Then we find out, oh, that's why. Okay, so um, he says there. So when I say I'm going to let you live in Goshen, right next to where I'm living, there I will provide for you, lest you and your household and all that you have come to poverty, for there are still 5 years of famine. So for 5 years, you got to live here. Again, that I'm emphasizing certain things because that's not how long they were there. They're there for hundreds of years, but that may not have been God's plan. That may have been their fault. Okay, and yet even though God knew, God told Abraham in advance, we may 400-year period where your children are not gonna before they really inherit this land, 400 years before they inherit this land. And they're going to suffer. And God knew what was going to happen, what choices that they were going to make. And I hope that you can see that they made the choice. Because people say, well, God had to, put them in slavery in order to grow them. No, he didn't. How they ended up in Egypt, we've got to talk about how they ended up staying there for the next couple hundred years. We will talk about. But he's saying there's still 5 years of famine, so you're going to be here at least 5 years. And behold, your eyes and the eyes of my brother Benjamin, see that it is my mouth that speaks to you. It's really me. Like, you got to believe that it's me. I know you thought I was dead. Uh, so you shall tell my father of all my glory in Egypt. Like, so he'll be happy for me. Of course, Joseph's still bragging a bit because that's his personality. Tell him of all my glory. Because he was told since he was a kid, you're the special one, and I've got the coat for you. And so tell him he was right. Look how important I am. Okay. And and of all that you have seen, and you shall hurry and bring my father down here. Then he fell on his brother Benjamin's neck, and he wept, and Benjamin wept on his neck. Oh, because again, they're the only two from that one mother. And so I thought you were dead. I thought you were dead. Oh, okay. Moreover, he kissed all his brothers and wept over them. And after that, his brothers talked with him. After that, once he finally got it all out, and they thought, this is not just another trap, because don't forget, this man has been fooling them for several months now, playing tricks with them, telling them, oh, yes, you can go. But then he put stuff in their sacks, so they had to come back. Oh, yes, you can take Benjamin. But then he put stuff in Benjamin's sacks, so they had to come back. So he could be just saying, yes, I'm your brother, trust me. And they don't know. So it said after that, after he said all of that, then they talked with him. Now the report of it was heard in Pharaoh's house, saying, Joseph's brothers have come. So it pleased Pharaoh and his servants well. They were very excited to have this family come down to Egypt. Why? We just have to discuss this Pharaoh because there's another Pharaoh coming where the Bible says there was a Pharaoh that did not know Joseph. I used to take that as didn't like Joseph, but actually it literally means did not know him. How could you not know Joseph? Well, this is what we got to talk about. Who this Pharaoh is, because this Pharaoh loved Joseph. Like, yay, this is fantastic. Loved his brothers, loved his family. But I thought the Egyptians despised the Hebrews. Yeah. So what is it about this Pharaoh? If the Egyptians despised the Hebrew, and Joseph couldn't even eat with his brothers at first because they thought he was Egyptian, and the Egyptians don't eat with. If they despised him so much, how come this Pharaoh loved him so much? Well, okay. Now let's just describe who the Egyptians are. So Noah had his three sons. Those of you who have somehow hung in since last March, I mean of 2020, Noah had three sons, right? Shem, Ham, and Japheth. We said that those three actually are the three huge genetic people groups on Earth now. Japheth's people mostly went up to Russia and over into Europe. Ham's people mostly went down through Africa, across to South America, other places. And Shem's people stayed in the Middle East and even went east to China. Okay, so I'm doing all these things. So um, the Egyptians were of the line of Ham. Now, I just want to remind us that it was Canaan's specific people. One of Ham's sons was Canaan. Another of Ham's sons was Cush. Cush's people went down and they founded several uh, strong kingdoms like Egypt, etc., Nubia. And so Canaan's people stayed in Canaan, and they were the Amorites and the Canaanites in that group that God ultimately judged. That group of people no longer exist on the earth because when God cursed them, He cursed them, but He could see way ahead of what they were going to do. These are the Sodom and Gomorrah people. These are the Tower of Babel people. These are the people who created the worst gods and that were the most offensive, who did the worst practices. That group, that Canaanite group, right? So, but they're still from Ham, their daddy. But the other brothers, Cush and all them, they came down. So genetically, they are not the Shem people who later became Shemites, right? They're not the same people as the Jews. This is one reason why the Egyptians did not love them, some Semites, because they were two different people. 1,000 years had passed since Noah and all that. Uh, so um, they were, well, I don't know if it's 1,000. I have to, I go so fast, but maybe 600 years had passed since Noah and all that. So they really had become two separate people. Um, the so you would think that the Egyptians are Arab, who are Semites, because they linguistically and culturally they're Arab, but the Arabs and the Jews, same family tree, Shem, but they're different. They're genetically different. Now, here's who had invaded Egypt: the Hyksos. The Hyksos. If you look this up, Hyksos. The Hyksos were a Semitic people, the Shem people of Shem, same people as the Hebrews, who uh, who invaded Egypt. Well, they didn't invade people. They slowly started moving down into Egypt around 1780, around the 1800s. And remember going backwards, going 18, 17, 16, 15, 1400s towards Christ. So around the 1800s, the 1780s, they started to move into a place called Avaris, uh, which is part of Egypt. It's in Lower Egypt. And they initiated the period that historians call the Second Intermediate Period. So you got the Old Kingdom, the Intermediate Period, the Middle Kingdom, the Second Intermediate Period, and then the New Kingdom. These are the major, if you study Egyptian, why would you? Okay, so they finally, so they slowly started to move in around the 1800s, and around 1650, we'll say, they conquered all of that, the Nile Delta area, and so they became the rulers in Egypt, the Hyksos people, for 100 years. So if you want to read up on their history, it's fascinating. This is around the same time. So the Hyksos moved in 50 years before Joseph and them came down. So these people were Semites. The ones who conquered Egypt were Semites, just like Joseph and them. But they spoke Egyptian. They adopted the Egyptian culture. They adopted the Egyptian language and all of that. So even though they were the ruler, so that you have the regular Egyptians and then you have these Semites who've come in and are ruling. So they adopted the culture of the people that they were ruling. And by the time Joseph and his family gets down there, he runs into this Pharaoh who is not that different than him. That's why he loved Joseph and his family so much, so much. So um, the main source of our information on these Hyksos, this people who ruled during this time, comes from a guy named, I want to get his name right, Manetho, um, who was an Egyptian historian. Here's what's interesting. Uh, People every so often think we should write this down. We should write down what's happening. Of course, they thought everybody's going to remember this. We're the Egyptians. We're the whoever. They're the Persians. We're the. But every so often, somebody would say, "Let me write down everything that's going on for future people." But that was not normal. It reminds me of in the early 60s, 70s, certain people have camcorders. No one else had camcorders. But there'd be certain people who were like recording birthday parties and recording things. And all the rest of us are like, well, that's so weird. Why are you recording everything? Now we look back at those old home movies and go, oh, this is fantastic that somebody had the foresight to record stuff. Now we all have phones, right? We're all recording. People are just recording what they eat that day. But when it first came out, only a few people had the foresight to think, "Oh, this is an important event. Let me have my little camera out." And we're so grateful that they did. Now it's common. Well, it's the same thing with these people who record history. Nobody's recording history. They didn't think like, "Why are you writing everything down?" People will remember. And so thank God for the people who did write this down. So they wrote about the Hyksos, who, again, they're the ones who were ruling in Egypt by the time that Joseph gets there, but they only ruled for 100 years. Um, Now, Egyptians, let me, when they first arrived, the Hyksos first got there in the 1800s, right? And then they didn't take power until like 1650, but they just slowly built up. And here's what became the problem for the Jews later. The Hyksos started out as a small group and this got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger in Egypt. And then one day they just took over. That is going to be the fear later for the Hebrew children that come down, Joseph and his family. Okay, there are a small group, there's only 75 of men, so there's probably 150 of them, it's only 75 men. Uh, but they're going to slowly get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's why the new Pharaoh, the one that came after the Hyksos, said, we got to stop this, because they just had an experience where a group of Semites had come down, and the Hyksos were from Syria, that area, that they had slowly grown bigger and bigger and bigger, and then finally took over. So let's see. Once they were established, uh, once they took over, the Hyksos, it says, when you read your history books, they placed Egyptians in significant positions. They adopted Egyptian customs and dress, incorporated the worship of Egyptian gods into their own beliefs and rituals. So you wouldn't have known that they were not Egyptian, because they promoted Egyptians, but the Pharaoh himself was a Semite similar to Joseph. So it says the Hyksos adapted quite well to the administrative system and structures of Egypt, maintained a very large staff of Egyptian origin. They respected their writing system, their artistic models, clothing, traditions, etc. And began to worship the Egyptian god Ra, right? Ammon Ra. So at the same time, the Hyksos were gaining power in northern Egypt. The Nubians were doing so in the south. So the Nubians, darker skinned, they're around Ethiopia. So they're gaining power in the south. You've got the Hyksos in the north, the Nubians in the south, and the last little true Egyptian, I mean, who were in power, were in Thebes, and they're stuck right in the middle, which is important. Okay, so the 13th dynasty, the Middle Kingdom, had been relegated to pay attention to their southern border, just as they had with Lower. Okay, so the 13th dynasty, the Egyptians, the true Egyptians who used to be in charge before the Hyksos people came, uh, they're being squeezed out, right? The Nubians are growing power in the south, and the Hyksos have taken over in the north, and just that last little remaining Egyptian power is in the center. Now, um, the the Nubians were in Cush, right? That was their capital, and again, Cush was one of the sons of Noah, um, and everything was fine. Things were cool. Joseph came down. That's why, again, this Egyptian king loved him because he was actually similar to Joseph. Because it was an odd reaction to have the Pharaoh go, "Yeah, bring your whole family down." Well, that's because we're the same people. I'm ruling these Egyptians, but I'm not really Egyptian. Um, so what happened is, um, when Joseph brought his family down, that Pharaoh upset the Theban king. Now, the king of Thebes, he's still Egyptian, right? So you got really three sections. He told him, "You got to move your hippopotamus pool away from my palace." And I'm not making this up because they're too loud. The hippopotamuses are loud in the morning and I can't sleep. And this upset the Theban, the king of Thebes. So they overthrew. He got his army to get like this was the last straw, and he'd been slowly building up his army anyway. So he came and they attacked Hyksos and got him out. This is while Joseph is there. They attacked these people from Hyksos, got him out. The king of Thebes, he didn't know who Joseph was. He didn't hire Joseph. He didn't live with Joseph. He didn't live there. He lived kind of in the middle. When they retook, and now they control the middle and the upper part of Egypt. Now that they control all that, and then they eventually went down and moved the Nubians back down south. So he had no idea who Joseph was. Why do you have all this power? And Joseph um, died, and then there's just his family still there, and like, who are you? And again, that same fear, we've got to control them. So we're gonna. This is coming up, but we got to control them because the Hyksos people they took over, and they were also Semites, and so we need to put them in chains. Now, all of this, God knew was happening. Here's one interesting thing about this drought, this 7-year drought. It was so severe that it's been that if you go to study Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania, this is the mountain that supplies the water to the Nile, right? Mount Kilimanjaro. Um, when archaeologists have studied that mountain, you can see over the years all the different things that happened. They've discovered that there was a huge drought that took place 3,600 years ago. So this is to the years 2000. That would be 1600 BC. 1600 plus 2000 is 3,000 years ago. So in 1600, these were the years that Joseph was there. Because remember, the Hyksos took over in 1650 and they were in power till 1550. So Joseph got there around 1600. Huge drought. There were proof that it happened. When the Hyksos people were defeated, the Thebans, the Egyptians came over and destroyed all of their stuff, got rid of all of their stuff. They did the same thing when the Jews eventually left Egypt, destroyed all of their dwellings. There's nothing left of it. So a lot of times people go back and say, well, we can't find any proof physically that the Jews were there because all their stuff was destroyed. You can't find proof that they were in the wilderness because they traveled in tents. They didn't build any structures. Nomadic people, there's not much proof that they ever existed in a certain place. It's like homeless people today or the unhoused people today. Once they leave an area, move to another area, their stuff is no longer there because they've moved it all. So somebody could come 50 years from now and say, there were no homeless. We don't see any proof that there was any homeless. Like, we all know they were homeless. We saw them. We wrote about them in our books. Well, there's no physical proof that their homeless was there. Well, but they were. So in the writings of that time, they write about the Jews, they write about Hyksos, they write about all these people, but their physical dwellings are not there. But we know they were there because of these Egyptian historians who, for some reason, let me just write all this down so people will know what happened. Okay, so so coming back to the story, this Pharaoh responded to finding out that Joseph's brother. It says Joseph, it pleased him and his servants well. Going back to verse 17, and Pharaoh says to Joseph, say to your brothers, do this, load your animals and depart and go to the land of Canaan. So it's like, I'm going to help you is basically what he's about to say. I'm going to help you bring your whole family down here. Verse 12 says, bring your father and your households and come to me. I will give you the best of the land of Egypt. And that's what Goshen initially was. And you will eat of the fat of the land. Now you are commanded to do this. So just one of those families like, no, you're going to come here. I'm going to feed you. We're going to eat. Like, he was very Semitic, if you know Semitic people. Love everybody. Everybody come in. Okay. I will give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you will eat of the fat of the land. Now you're commanded to do this. Take carts out of the land of Egypt for your little ones and your wives. Bring your father and come. Also, do not be concerned about your goods, for the best of all the land of Egypt is yours. So again, for people who supposedly hate the Jews, hate the Hebrew people, that's odd. And that's because he wasn't Egyptian. Now, verse 21, then the sons of Israel did so. And Joseph gave them carts according to the command of Pharaoh, and he gave them provisions for the journey. He gave to all of them, to each man, changes of garments. But to Benjamin, he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of garments. This is Joseph spoiling Benjamin. If you remember from last week, that turned out to not be a great thing, because Benjamin's getting the idea that the world revolves around him. You think Joseph was bad. Benjamin, everybody's life hinged on Benjamin. First of all, his father protected Benjamin. No, you can't take Benjamin down there. You can all go down there, but Benjamin gets to stay. And when they came back and they had left Simeon down there, father said, that's too bad. Simeon's going to have to just die. And because you cannot have Benjamin. And when they finally convinced him to take Benjamin down there, Joseph, who they think is a Egyptian ruler, is lavishing things on him, and in fact says to the brothers, you go, Benjamin can stay. He has to stay. And Judah says, no, Benjamin, I'll give my life for Benjamin. So this is all Benjamin is hearing, and it doesn't stop. Joseph never stopped spoiling Benjamin. So Benjamin grew up thinking, I am the most incredible person in the world, and I would teach my family that. And he did. And that's why Benjamin their line continued to get in trouble, because they were very stubborn and just kind of self-centered and did their own thing, and did crazy stuff. So if you heard last week's lessons, Benjamin did crazy stuff, that his children. Okay, so he gave him 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of garments for their trip back to get the father. You can change, it's like he was at the Academy Awards. You know how the hosts just change clothes every 5 minutes? So just for this long trip, you get to change clothes, put in different outfits. And he sent to his father these things: 10 donkeys loaded with the good things of Egypt, 10 female donkeys loaded with grain and bread and food for his father for the journey. Like, you won't even be hungry on your way back. So he sent his brothers away, and they departed. And he said to them, see that you do not become troubled along the way. Because he knows his brother, and he knows they're going to get in a fight along the way back. Well, this is all your fault. Because he had seen them do it. Because as soon as they first got there, and they got in trouble, and Joseph had tricked them by putting grain in their sack and stuff like that. No. When they first got there, and Joseph accused them of being spies. You're spies. You come down here to. Reuben instantly said, I told you this is happening because this is what we did to Joseph, and it's your fault. And they already started fighting, right? So see that you don't, because I want you to make it back to your father's house, because I know how you are. You'll kill a brother. So don't kill each other on the way back, please, because I'm giving you all this stuff. Please, it's the same when the youngest brother has to tell the elders, try not to fight along the way back. So, verse 25. Then they went up out of Egypt and came to the land of Canaan to Jacob their father. And they told him, saying, Joseph is still alive. Now, again, been 22 years that he thought his son was dead. They showed him his bloody garment. Joseph is still alive, and he is governor over all the land of Egypt. That like would be crazy, right? Someone that you knew was dead would come back and say, "Oh, not only am I not dead, but I'm the president of Paris or something." You know, what? I founded Microsoft. No, what? So he's the governor over all the land of Egypt. And Jacob's heart stood still because he did not believe them, and literally means he almost had a heart attack because he did not believe. Like what? Like you would like he's not only is he alive, but he's the governor of Egypt. But when they told him all the words which Joseph had said to them, and when he saw the carts which Joseph had sent to carry him, then the spirit of Jacob their father revived. Literally, I mean, like he was. They, no, no, no. Look, they're like having to catch him. No, look. He sent all this stuff. Like this is, and truly, you'd have to be a governor of Egypt to be able to send 10 donkeys and all this stuff in the middle of a famine when nobody has anything. So okay, so they brought him back to life. Then Israel said, "Okay, it is enough. I believe you now. Joseph, my son, is still alive. I will go and see him before I die." So, because that he was afraid to go down to Egypt. There are reasons he was afraid to go down to Egypt. In Genesis chapter 26, his father had been told, uh, "Don't go down to Egypt." It says there was a famine in the land. This is Genesis 26. There was a famine in the land besides the first famine that was in the days of Abraham. Now remember, when Abraham there was a famine, he'd gone down to Egypt. He had lied about Sarah. Say you're my sister, and the Pharaoh then, who was an Egyptian Pharaoh at that time, in the old kingdom they called it, took Sarah, thinking that was Abraham's sister, and then there was plagues on his house and all, and then God came to him, and then he realized that you lied to me, Abraham, and he gave him a bunch of stuff and said, "Get out of here." So God only let him stay there for a little while, and then Abraham had to leave. Yeah. Right, get to stepping. So then 20 years later, Abraham came back and did the very same thing because he just didn't believe that God would protect him a second time. And we think that, well, I know God almost saved my life, but you're gonna be tempting fate, so I can't expect God to save me again. Yes, you can. You still don't have to lie. So he lied again, and then they found out, and all right. So the first famine had sent Abraham to Egypt, and he was there just a little while, and then they loaded him up with stuff and sent him out. It hadn't been that severe of a famine. But it says this second famine that happened to Isaac, sorry. Isaac went to Abimelech, king of the Philistines in Gerar. So he went to southern, where the Palestinians live today, in the southern part of Israel, on his way to Egypt. So he goes there first, in what's called Gerar. It says, then the Lord appeared to him. We're in Genesis chapter 26, and said, "Do not go down to Egypt. Live in the land which I shall tell you." I know there's a famine, but don't go down to Egypt. Just live where I will tell you. Dwell in this land. And again, it's almost like you can visit for a minute, but live here. Dwell in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. For to you and to live in Egypt. And I will perform the oath which I swore to Abraham your father, and I will make your descendants multiply as the stars of heaven, and I will give to your descendants all these lands, and in your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. So his son, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob had it drilled into his head, do not live in Egypt. So he was afraid to even go down there. Joseph knew it would take all that just to lure him down there, but there was still 5 years left of famine. And Joseph said, not only there, in order to get him to come down here so I could take care of him for the next 5 years, I got to convince him it's okay. I'm the governor here. Nothing horrible is going to happen, even though God did give a warning to our grandfather, because Abraham was only their grandfather. It wasn't like, you know, 5 generations ago. Our grandfather Abraham, he said, your children are going to be captured, your descendants, by a nation that is not theirs, and they will torture them and keep them in bondage. And it'll be 400 years before they actually own this land that I'm giving you. So he had to say, I'm the governor here. So nothing bad can happen to you. I'm the governor. Come on down. And because there's 5 years left of this famine, let me feed you. I can see what God is doing. I can see what God is doing. Yes, be here for 5 years. Let me feed your family. And then I'm going to send you back to Israel because that's the land I've given you. Next week, we're going to try to start looking at why didn't they just follow that plan? Why didn't they just stay there for 5 years until the drought was over and then go back to Israel? And you'll see that Joseph made a couple moves that actually doomed his family to be in slavery. But we'll see in the chapters coming up exactly what happened. So that's enough for today. We will start Genesis chapter 46 tomorrow, and we'll see. The good news is even when we mess up, even when God warns you, he does make sure you get the consequences, because it's important for us to know, oh, this happened because I didn't listen to God. That's important. So consequences are important to God because they teach us, okay, I wasn't sure if that was God. Now I realize that was God because I can see that I didn't listen. Sometimes I'll put Waze on. Waze is the little GPS on your car, and it'll tell you what traffic to avoid. And I think to myself, that doesn't make any sense. Go in that direction. It's right there. I'm just going to go straight on. And then I drive a couple blocks and it's full of roadblocks. There's an accident and I'm delayed for an hour. I go, oh, that's why Waze was trying to get me to go that other way. Because the satellite could look down and see what I could not see. The satellite could see this whole neighborhood and realize there's an accident there. So that's why it had me going this weird route. But I didn't know that. I only knew what I could see right in front of my face. And that's how God is. I can see the whole big picture. The reason I'm having you do this and go in this route that you're thinking, why am I doing that? Is because I can see down the road. I know what's coming, but you can't. So it's important that he gives us consequences. We go, oh, that's why. And it helps us recognize his voice. Next time we go, oh, that same feeling I had that last time that I didn't listen, I'm getting that again. So this time I'm going to listen. So he's warning them. They don't listen. But the good news is, even when we don't listen and we get the consequences, he even anticipates that. And he has a way out, even in those cases. Yes, there are consequences to us not listening, but God then has a way out. So in the middle of our consequences, we're saying, okay, God, I know I'm here because I should have listened to you. Thank you for delivering from me this ultimately. Once the consequences are done and I've learned my lesson, thank you that you have a way out. So even in this jail cell, even in this lion's den, not that was Daniel's fault, but even in this whatever situation I'm in, I'm going to sing and praise you because you have a way out. And if I'm just calm, I'll see it. Joseph was not calm when his brothers first got there. He was angry with them. Naturally, they had tried to kill him and then sold him off to slavery.
Really bad.
Yes, but he didn't recognize, oh, you didn't send me here. God, oh, I see the bigger picture now. It took him a while to see the bigger picture. And sometimes it takes us a while. And so God has to put us through certain things so that we can finally let go of our plan, because we all have a plan. Go, oh, okay, I see why this isn't working. I needed to relax. Oh, now I see the bigger picture. I see the bigger thing that God was trying to do. And so that's why these stories are here, for our admonition, for our education, because God doesn't change. That's why it says Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, forever. God is still teaching us the same lessons. God doesn't grow. God doesn't say, oh, last time I tried this, so I'm going to try something different. He knows what he's doing. We are the ones that grow and change because we look at these stories from the past and we learn from them and go, okay, because he's going to do the same thing. So we recognize him, go, okay, this is just like with Moses, or this is just like, and he uses the same methods. on purpose so that we'll recognize, oh, this is God. And then hopefully we grow and we learn. So I will continue next week in Genesis chapter 46. And in on Mondays, I mean, sorry, on Wednesday's Bible study, I'm in the book of John, and we're about to start the second chapter of John. So if you haven't been listening, you can tune in, and we're going through the book of John, also verse by verse. Okay, thank you so much for tuning in, and we will continue next week. Wait, save, yes, and then in live video.